We interrupt this introduction music to use the power of sales and marketing to tug at your heartstrings. Hi, Herd Mentalists. Thanks for listening in. I'm kicking off the show today with a plea, and with your support I can make this a one-time plea before we get into the fun stuff. Each episode takes roughly 2 hours to record, and, well, today's show took a total of 9.5 hours, spread over about 3 or 4 days, to edit and upload, which is a big job removing ums and ahs and so forth. This doesn't account for the time I spend promoting the show, which is hours in itself, researching topics, sourcing guests, and dealing with time zones. To put it in perspective, each $2 a month you donate to helping me is $1.62 after PayPal takes a slice. So I need big numbers of humans, each donating a small amount. In the last month, recurring donations are at a grand total of $167. The first $90 of which goes to hosting the files, and 10% of which I donate to kiva.org. I think it's really important with what I'm doing to donate to those less fortunate than me, and I'm specifically donating to women in developing countries to lift their education. To date, for 18 episodes of the show, it's earned almost 2/3 of a bowl of dirt, and I'm exceedingly grateful to the donors so far because it's 2/3 of a bowl of dirt that I didn't have a month ago. I know who you are, and I thank you very much. The recurring monthly payments are the best way to help me produce the show, as it's something that I can budget for each month. I see significantly more out of a $5 recurring donation, which is $4.53 to be exact. While this helps me a lot more, you're actually helping yourself with Herd Mentality Afterlife insurance to cover your chariot in case of breakdown or windscreen damage. A ridiculous $10 a month will net you a guaranteed, ironclad, rock-solid 647.9 virgins when you reach your desired fictional sky haven. To help me out making this podcast a sustainable endeavour, the amazing @DominicVFX, whose tip jar is available at herdmentalitypodcast.com, has put up a target on the website, and all ongoing donors will have their abbreviated name put in the slider bar at the top of each page as proof of how ungodly they really are. Briefly, once we hit this target, it will allow me to develop more material for the show, such as a comic series featuring my second-rate cow scribblings and terrible gags, as well as a book I've begun scheming on how to sell something that doesn't exist. My background is in sales and marketing, so I feel I have something to say on the issue. All monthly tithers will receive a free copy of the book in ebook form once it's completed, as thanks for making it all happen and helping me pay some bills along the way. The show is a big job, and as you'll hear from what you're about to listen to, things have been rather emotionally taxing of late, so as such I'm taking the first holiday I've had in almost 2 years. 2 weeks camping. I'll be fishing and drafting a book. I'll make some big decisions about how much time I can then dedicate to the project moving forward once I get back. So please help me reach the target, which will in turn help me help others in the atheist community. I appreciate your generosity almost as much as I'm sure you will appreciate the virgins. Finally, if you'd like to come on the show, please visit the contact page after you finish donating and fill out your name and email with a description of a topic you'd like to discuss. I can then match you up with other herd mentalists and make for a better program. So now back to the show, and thanks again. Welcome to the Herd Mentality Podcast, an eclectic weekly mix of atheistic and humanistic conversations with complete strangers. I've never met them and they've never met me, but we're throwing caution to the wind, taking a risk with a dodgy internet connection, and God willing, get an interesting conversation for you to listen to. I'm your host, Adam Reeks, and it's time to meet our guests. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Herd Mentality Podcast. With me today, I have Jake Farr-Wharton from a far better podcast than my own. Jake, hello.
Hello, what a joke.
What's your show?
All things are relative when it comes to podcasting. My show is the Imaginary Friends Show.com podcast, the one true podcast on many things.
I've been on there.
You have, much to the detriment of the podcast.
Indeed. So I had you on now to lift the caliber of this show. So I've actually met you before. So this is one of those podcasts where I'm really going against the grain of the very essence of the Herd Mentality Podcast, because not only have I at least met you over Skype, Jake, but with us today we have Dr. Dave Hawkes. Hello, Dave.
G'day, how are you going?
Well, I'm very well. I've had a couple of beers, and you have as well?
Yeah, it's really quite weird doing it. This is, I think, the third time I've been on the show. The fact that I'm sitting about 2 foot away from you.
I know, we're both huddled over a laptop in my lounge room, over a laptop that's making far too much noise with the tiny little iPod headphones. So we're really podcasting on a shoestring.
Can I tell you though, listeners, I can see them in the video. They look adorable together.
I know. It's a bit fabulous on this end. You're looking very muscled, Jake. I've got to say.
I actually look that way all of the time.
Right.
It's just
You've got your wife beater on.
got my wife beater on. It's actually extraordinarily hot up here. You know, I miss winter, that one day of the year in Queensland that we have, which is slightly cool, which was 2 weeks ago. But yeah, we haven't seen a skerrick of coolness in some time. And as I said, it's quite hot. So yes, the wife beater is a necessity. It's basically the Queensland version of the tuxedo.
Right, the banana bender's tuxedo. All right, so if anyone is playing along at home, it's at Jake Farr, FARR-WHARTON on Twitter.
There's no hyphen on the Twitter one.
See, I always get the Twitter handles wrong for the podcast. That's the sort of show I run. It's very B-grade. And Dave Hawkes is at Mr. Hawkes. And I'm at Adam Rees, but I'm guessing anyone who's unfortunate enough to be listening to this probably already follows me. So today we're going to talk about something sad. Fortunately, it's not going to be the usual giggles that we have on the show, having really entertaining people on and chatting about the lighter things in life.
I think you're overestimating the amount of giggles you normally get, mate.
I think you might be right. I did, on the last podcast, I shoehorned in the clip of my stand-up comedy, the one and only time I've done stand-up comedy. I did a stand-up comedy course, and they said, what you're aiming for is high JPMs, so high jokes per minute. And it's not a strategy that I've applied to the Herd Mentality podcasts.
Well, your stand-up was really good. It was really funny.
Oh, thank you, Jake.
I enjoyed it. I did my own stand-up at the beginning of this year, but I did it as a scientist, so we didn't have very much training at all. Apart from they said, if you want to be sweary or whatever, go for it. Really push those boundaries. So I think I've dropped 2 swear words in an 8-minute set, and we had complaints. Apparently, we had complaints because they made the great assumption of the institute where I work for is quite innovative, and it's really great to be a part of the flurry. But they invited a lot of their they're elderly, they're more stoic sponsors to this stand-up comedy, which was just not a fantastic idea. And so they spent the next week writing apologetic letters to retired sponsors of the flurry, apologising for my language.
That's awesome.
Well, there you go. So, yeah, Dave's flown up from Melbourne, so this is actually the second time we've met. We ran into each other a couple of weeks ago in Sydney and had a beer.
And now you're in Sydney having another beer.
Another beer, but Dave's come over to Chateau Riarc's fine establishment here.
Opposite Target?
Yeah. If not far from a Target. If Secular Bloke is listening in, he probably isn't, but we're drinking James Squire the Chancer Golden Ale. It's a fine drop, but we're drinking it out of a bucket. Look, we're not here to talk terps. We're here to talk emotions and get all our man feelings out into the open. So you guys know a lot more about this stuff than I do, but I'll give you a little bit of a backstory. Many, many moons ago, I used to run a sales and marketing business, and everything was going beautifully, and then some Americans sold some stuff or bought some stuff. China got sold and Russia got bought. And anyway, the economy turned to rubbish, and I ended up having to make some really big decisions, and they were really tricky ones because I had 4 staff plus myself, so a whole bunch of vehicles I was running, and the total business was turning over $2.5 million a year in sales. So it wasn't small, and it just basically hit the wall, and I had to make some really tough calls and dismiss some staff. And the subsequent months and, well, in fact, about 12 months following that, it was a really tough time for me, and I went and saw the doctor and had a chat to him about my man emotions, and I got diagnosed with severe depression. So I thought we'd get together, given that you guys know more about this stuff than I do, and maybe talk openly about it and find out how it works and what can be done to treat it and what in fact it is. So what have I got, Jake? Do you know?
You mean apart from herpes?
Apart from herpes. Can't wash those off.
Oh, geez, you can try though.
Try as you might.
If you listen carefully, you can just hear the sound of me shuffling along. away.
Yeah, we've got Dave's enforcing his 0 kisses policy, unfortunately.
Don't you hate it when people have those? Far out.
No, we need a longer headphone lead.
Well, what's happening with you? You're a human. That's what's happening with you. One of the most magical things that I've ever experienced in my life, much the same as you, is a severely detrimental period where I went through anxiety and depression. Now, all things are relative when we talk about anxiety and depression. Your situation is your situation, and the situation that you had caused a neurological condition, and, you know, you went through some rather serious symptoms as a consequence. My situation was different. But again, it's because all of these things, when it comes down to depression, anxiety, etc., it's all relative to the individual that you're talking about. So one of the first things that you need to do, I suppose, is recognize that we're all human. We all have this biology that was shaped over hundreds of billions of years. Or rather, that was a misspeak. Sorry, over billions of years, over hundreds of thousands of years on, in the
at least
in the African savannah. We are a slave to our biology. It really only takes a small amount of stimulus to set off what is an otherwise very functional and very useful flight or fight reflex, which will send adrenaline coursing through your body, you know, enabling you to fight off an attacker or to run while, you know, your calf has been severed because the tiger has swiped too close to you.
The saber-toothed rabbit.
The saber-toothed rabbit, yeah, exactly. Jackalope. So we have within us, thanks to, again, hundreds of thousands of years, you know, honing these instincts, biological conditions that can be triggered by weird stimuli that is completely not associated with what it was selected for in the beginning. You know, right now, I'm not in a savannah in the Cape of Africa. Right now, I'm in a...
Dressed for it, though.
I certainly am. Mind you, the white skin does tend to burn. But you know, I'm in a brick house in Queensland, in fairly temperate weather. And while, you know, things going bad in my life, which will certainly set off the flight or fight reflexes that will send adrenaline coursing through my body, that will inhibit certain, neurotransmitters in my brain from being uptaken or from, being reuptaken, in the brain to the proper degree or to the way that it should be in normal humans. While the conditions are not normal, while they're not, what they were when they evolved, we're still human. We still have this biology. We still all have flaws, and we are all prone to these neurological conditions, these depressive, anxious conditions, which can be set off with just such a small amount of stimulus.
It really doesn't take much. And over time, I found that for no reason whatsoever, there might not even be any stimulus per se, but I'll find the heart just goes boom, and all of a sudden goes out of control. So, Dave,
I might jump in here because, apart from all my virus work, I'm actually a neuroscientist and I work on anxiety. I guess you're talking about this fight and flight. I think it's really interesting to know that we're talking about two different things. What we think of as fear and what we think of as anxiety. Now, they're actually two sides of the coin, and if you're talking technical, fear we call something learned, and anxiety we call it innate fear. And the difference is, with fear, that's fight and flight. If you're standing in a bike path and a snake is in front of you, that's fear. Your blood pressure goes up, your heart rate goes up, you start sweating, your temperature changes, your neural activity changes. When you run away, or in Queensland you shoot it, when the snake ceases to be in your vicinity, then that dissipates. Your blood pressure goes down. Everything goes back to normal. You think about it and you kind of go, wow, I saw a snake today. That's fear. And that's actually one condition, and that affects certain brain pathways. You've got the related one, which is anxiety, which is what you're talking about, Adam, where anxiety is where you don't have a direct stimulus. So you could be worried about snakes, and you're sitting in your lounge room talking at a podcast, and you start thinking about snakes, and then you get these responses of your body. Your brain activity changes, your blood pressure changes, you get sweaty. And that's anxiety because there's no stimulus. There's nothing that you can move away from that will reduce this stress. And this is what we're talking about. We're talking about stress, and we're talking about emotional stress. So physical stress is when you run a marathon, you get sweaty and your brain waves change and your heart rate goes up, and you can stop that by sitting down. Emotional stress, particularly things like anxiety, you can't really, there's no clear way to get away from it. And this is why it affects so many people, and it's quite difficult to treat.
And it was so new to me, given that I'd never experienced it before. I actually had an attack. What I subsequently found out was a panic attack. I thought I was having a heart attack. I called an ambulance. The ambulance came out here and they just sat me down and hooked me up to the machine and said, no, you're not going to die. You'll be fine. And at that point, I went and spoke to the doctor and thought, okay, maybe it's time to be a man about it and try and deal with it. And I'll speak pretty openly about it to anyone who'll listen. So that's why I kind of wanted to get you guys on so I could find out a little bit more about it myself.
Can I ask you a question, Adam?
Yeah, sure.
When you went, and I went through a similar type of thing, I didn't call the ambulance, but it didn't make it, any less real. When I went to see the doctor and I was going through those sort of panic attack symptoms, I asked the doctor for antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication, and we went through the little questionnaire that they get you to fill out.
Test,
the SAD test.
This might not be an international thing, so it's what something stress, anxiety, and depression test, and they sort of
basically gives you a rating out of whatever it is, 100 or something, of how depressed you are, how anxious you are, etc. How likely you are to walk away and top yourself, basically, because they're obliged, obviously, to take care of you if you are. But I just wanted to ask you, because it seems to me that I've run into other people who had similar predilections. When you asked for the medication, or when you were given the medication, did you feel as though it was cheating?
In a way. See, I actually initially didn't want to take the medication. I thought that would be option B. I wanted to try and deal with it in a way that didn't necessarily require me to go onto tablets. Everything's a drug. What matters is the dose, and then with every drug, there's a side effect.
Yes.
So the first step, I went and saw the shrink. I had a couple of chats with her, and it got worse before it got better.
Yeah.
And when it began to get worse, and I went from being depressed to being severely depressed, was to go back to the doctor and say, look, it's now time to give the happy tablets a go. And the first one I went on, I couldn't tell you the name because they're very difficult to spell and I don't have a memory for such things, but I called it coxafloppin. So I wasn't particularly thrilled with that one. Gave that a go for about, because you need to give it 2 or 3 weeks before it actually takes hold. And then when you decide to change it for whatever biological reasons that we won't elaborate upon right now.
But you already did.
I may have hinted at it somewhat. You need to take a break for about 4 or 5 days, and then you jump onto the next tablets. But the next tablets had a completely different side effect, and that was that I would be absolutely exhausted all of the time. I'd wake up anywhere between 2 in the morning and 5 in the morning and be wide awake.
Yep.
It was a great time to do editing for the podcast. There was just no background. I just could sit down, concentrate. The phones weren't ringing. No one was around. It was dead silent. It was just great. So as far as a lifestyle drug goes, it was actually quite good. But in terms of being able to hold down a day job and be productive during the day, I'd sort of get to 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock midday and then just
have to crash.
I'd be out for a couple of hours.
Yeah.
And then again, I'd be in bed at 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night. So yeah, we decided that one wasn't the way to go either. So
you sort of went through several drugs before you found one that worked?
Well,
one that didn't have so many side effects?
I've been prescribed one, and the doctor has given me the instructions that if you feel it's time to go back on them again, go on this one. And perhaps, Dave, you might know a little bit more about this than I do. It's a drug that acts differently to the previous two. It uses
SSRIs, is it?
No,
diazepam or
no. It wasn't your standard antidepressant. It had to be taken 3 times a day. But he prescribed this knowing that it had no reported side effects.
So it'd be like Prestique is one of those ones that sort of falls into the fewer side effects column. The selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor.
Could be. I could even go and get the prescription and tell you. I'm not. I'm not on it. I've subsequently decided that I'm doing quite reasonably without them.
Oh, good on you.
So,
that's fantastic. I did want to say though, the reason why I asked the question, Adam, is because I kind of went through a very similar sort of thing. Went to the doctor, said I need help. I need psychologist. Really worst symptoms that I think I've ever gone through in my entire life. Need help. Get me to a psychologist now. So I went through the shrink. I will forever remember her as Pamphlet Lady because basically I went 2 days in a row, and both days I received, basically an entire novel like a J.R.R. Tolkien esque novel full.
Sounds like she moonlights at the election and
exactly, yeah.
handing out the pamphlets as well.
So it was ridiculous. So she'll be forever known as pamphlet lady, as I said. But yeah, I didn't feel that I was getting the help from her, and the symptoms were, much like you said, getting worse and worse. So at that stage, I said, I need help. I need drugs. Took the drugs. But at that stage, I feel that I was so close, and I certainly had enough suicidal thoughts by then that I realized that if I didn't do something, that I was going to do something, if you know what I mean. So I decided to go for diazepam, which is an anti-anxiety medication, and Pristiq, which is as I said, the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which serotonin is actually Dr. Hawkes would probably be able to tell us a hell of a lot
talk
more.
us through it, Dave.
I'm not a pharmacologist, so in terms of that, I've worked on diazepam a bit because it's a drug that's
delicious.
So good.
I'm really hoping I get this right. It's Valium.
Yeah, it is.
Diazepam is Valium, and anything ending in PAM is essentially, it acts on a GABA receptor, and I won't go into it because partially I don't really know that much about it. But what we use it for is because I was talking about anxiety and fear. Basically fear, your response to fear doesn't really get affected by anti-anxiety drugs, whereas your anxiety does. And in terms of the different drugs, what I'm doing, the long ball of my research is that I work on a neuropeptide, which is a type of protein that's built in the brain. Neuropeptide means it's a small protein. And this is found in about 4,000 cells. So this is an animal brain, but very similar number in humans. There's about 100 billion brain cells. Well, Queenslanders, there's about... Just change it. Sorry, I'm feeling quite parochial. I'm here in New South Wales. I'm trying to get into the swing of it. So it's a really tiny amount, because the problems we get, you're talking about side effects. Any drug that has an effect can have a side effect. Whether, it's getting the balance, and side effects are side effects. You might take a drug that will, help your depression and reduces your drive to eat a little bit, and you kind of go, well, I'm losing a bit of weight, I'm feeling a bit better about myself. That's a side effect, but it's one you can live with. You have a side effect that's, let's just say, affects erection, then that's probably not a side effect you can deal with. But if you're 90...
No, we don't want that.
If you're 90 years old, you probably go, well, I can deal with that. It's about balancing those sorts of things. And so we're looking at this Relaxin 3 because we know it affects anxiety. I'm up in Sydney to present at a conference exactly this sort of stuff. We know it affects eating disorders and sleeping disorders. And because it's only in so few cells, if we can actually work out, we obviously have to learn a lot more about it. We only discovered it about 10 years ago. We actually discovered it at the Florey as well. So giving a bit of a plug for some of the great research done down there. And if we can actually target that with the drug, it's going to affect less cells, and therefore we should have less side effects. And you guys have a much better idea than I do, but medications for anxiety and for depression and for most sort of psychological illnesses from schizophrenia on down are not fantastic at the moment.
No, it's like trying to shoot very accurately with a 12-gauge shotgun at a ray.
With a scatter shot.
Again, you guys both came up with exactly the same thing. It's like I wanted to maybe avoid medications, but then it's risk versus reward. You kind of go, well, these are the side effects, but if I'm having suicidal tendencies, getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning is maybe something I can deal with for at least a period of time. And obviously, if you can be able to, and I'm not a psychologist, so please, no one listening take this as any sort of
That's right. He hasn't charged me for this session, so tell me he's not a psychologist.
No, you can tell me about your mother later, and maybe we'll get up a bill. And it's all about balance, and this is what makes it really hard, because antibiotics, you tell someone they'll be on them for generally a week, 2 weeks, and then you're cured. Whereas, if I can just hijack this conversation for a minute, you were going back, Jake, you were so saying this is something that happens in your brain. And that's the thing, I'm from an outer suburbs of Melbourne. I'm from a place where, men talked about their feelings, and it came down to he should have kicked a goal, that stupid wanker. And that was the emotional context to which I suspect a lot of Australian males was brought up with. So, depression was something about not being hard enough. But if you look at a brain of an animal, of a person that's got anxiety, or it's got depressive illness, there's changes. You can identify them. If you get a series of brains and you look at them, and we have, a lot of people would be familiar with antioxidants. They're the stuff that dodgy healthcare practitioners try and sell you, but they're designed to take out free radicals. Animals which have high level of anxiety have higher levels of free radicals. Higher free radicals affects the aging of your brain, and they affect your blood pressure. They can lead to more damage, cancers, all these sorts of things. So if you're actually anxious for long periods of time, even at low levels, that's the major risk of heart disease or stroke. So these are actually biological
so
things.
So we need more aspirin for that.
Yeah, don't get me started.
But you also get as one of the other chemicals or hormones that your body releases during times of anxiety and stress is cortisol, which has all sorts of organ-killing properties associated with it. You know, it's fine in sort of low doses, and it's omnipresent basically, but in high doses, it can really eat you away. It can really hurt you.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is, for anyone listening, again, this is just a little bit of science tidbit. A hormone is anything that's produced in one area of the body and gets shipped to another area. So if anyone's ever wondering what a hormone is, well, that's what it is. It's like angiotensin, something I've worked on, which heart tension, so affects your blood pressure. It's produced in the kidney, it's processed in the lung, but it goes around your entire body, including your brain, testosterone, estrogen, obviously hormones. But our bodies are a balance. And there's no clear, you can't say, oh, well, stop doing this, because if it's happening in your body, it's happening for a reason. Sometimes it's convoluted. Well, sometimes, drinking 2 litres of water a day is good. Drinking 10 litres of water a day is bad, and drinking no water at all a day is bad. It's about balance, and so there are no clear things. And as you said, it depends on the individual and it depends on the situation, and your situation now is going to be different your situation in 12 months.
So what are there any issues with drinking, say, a bucket of beer?
None at all. In fact, I'm testament to that.
Well, I mean, the problem, the major health issue and the sort of the issue with depression, anxiety with drinking a bucket of beer is that last bit just smacks you in the face. And that's not a good look.
No, that's true. But alcohol is a depressant.
Yes. Alcohol is a depressant, and so if you are having difficulties and you are drinking quite a lot, then maybe give it a break.
Back it off a little bit. But also withdrawal from alcohol is quite harsh as well.
Yeah, that's why I was suggesting it. Back
it off a little bit. Yeah, so the antidepressant and anxiety medication was for me at least, and I know for a lot of people that I've spoken to since going through this, it was the start. Basically, it was what I needed in order to be able to access normal life or some semblance of normal life. And during the next few weeks and months, really, I went through several different psychologists until I found really two at the same time that wouldn't give me pamphlets.
One to hold you down, the other one to yell at you.
But they were fantastic. So one of them actually taught me what I now use daily, which I had done in my distant past but hadn't done for such a long time, which was meditation. And the meditation was what I needed. See, a lot of the times, and Adam, you might be able to back me up with the symptoms themselves, is a lot of the time when an anxiety attack or a panic attack sets in, you've got this initial little bit of stimulus, whatever it happens to be, that starts it off.
And then the ball rolls.
And then it gets bigger and it snowballs, and then it's so big that it crushes you, and then et cetera, et cetera.
And then it's tears before bedtime.
And then it's tears in bedtime. And then the bed's wet. But, and it's not from the tears. It's from sweat, just to be clear. It was from the sweat. It was a sweat. So a lot of the time, the meditation, for me at least, it's not the same for everybody. Same as the medication. It's not the same for everybody. It doesn't work in the same way with everybody. The side effects are different with everybody. With meditation, for me, what it helped me do was to put my mind in the moment, to get rid of the peripheral feelings, thoughts, cascade of emotions, the roller coasters, all of that stuff, and just focus on the tension in, specific muscles. A single bead of sweat that was rolling down my forehead. It just basically, it gets you to think right there in the here and now. And then, of course, secondary to that is the exercise. The exercise is so important.
Well,
which is why,
paying off, clearly.
Yeah, well, as you pointed out, yes, it's paying off quite well. But funnily enough, when I went through the anxiety episode, I went through an entire week of, well, it was more than a week, it was about 2 weeks of non-stop panic attack and anxiety attacks. It did not let up at all. During that week, I didn't eat. I barely slept. I went prematurely grey. I lost all my leg hair in a fit of shaving. I can't even explain it. Okay, so
that's all right. Well, we might keep that as bonus material for the show.
It was just really weird. I don't know. Some people shave their beard. Some people shave their legs. There you go. During that time, I dropped over 12 kilos. It just went off me.
So there was a benefit.
That's a lot of leg hair. That's a lot of leg hair to lose 12
I am
kilos.
Italian, so yes.
Wow. I guess one of the things you talk about meditation, and I've sort of spoken to a few people just out of interest on this topic, and there's a lot of things you can get on YouTube, and there's one called effective meditation. It's like attention training, and a lot of people
Cosmic
with anxiety. No, it is not cosmic consciousness. I can hear you, dude. Like seriously. And the idea is it's about a 10-minute YouTube thing, and it just gets you to listen to sounds. Because the idea, and exactly what you describe, is there's one thing that sort of works as a trigger, and then it steamrolls. And the idea of meditation or of attention training is so that you can have those trigger thoughts, and you can kind of go, all right, let's just pick. One of the most common is like, okay, I'm going to get fired from my job, or my girlfriend or boyfriend is going to dump me. Let's pick girlfriend's going to dump me. My girlfriend's going to dump me. And that's a thought that's going to pop in your head. There's nothing you can do about that. What will happen when you're in an anxiety or a panic or a depressive state? And in very broad brushstrokes is that you'll latch onto that. And then you'll start mulling it over, and you'll start chewing it over, and then you'll just start and all these things will steamroll. And so this meditation or attention training, the idea behind it is that you kind of go, oh, my girlfriend's going to dump me. You kind of go, well, we've been together for 2 years. Things are
probably
really
time
good.
for a new one.
Not helping. Start hurting. So what it means is that you get your girlfriend, you kind of go, oh, my girlfriend's going to leave me. You go, well, and you sort of step back and you go, well, no, we went out for a great dinner. We're looking at houses together. Actually, if I look at this and I analyze it, well, no, that's not likely to happen. And you put it away, and then you don't latch onto it. And this is the goal of your meditation or of your attention training. So when those thoughts pop in, you think about it, you look at it, and you spend the same amount of time you do when you get a water bill. Kind of go, okay, yeah, that's it. Yeah, I've got some money in my bank account. Yeah, I'll pay it. That's good. I'll just drop it and leave it at the front door and won't think about it again until the next one pops into your letterbox.
Yeah, look, the shrink I went and spoke to gave me a piece of paper and
just one, though, just one.
Oh. Just one shrink.
No,
yeah,
no,
I
meant
rich,
one.
Jake.
I meant
I'm not from a mining
one sheet
state.
of paper. Sorry, I wasn't referring to the number of shrinks.
She had on the thing 3 columns. I think from memory, it was a while ago. She said, "What's going on in your mind now? If you were somebody else." Looking in at the situation, is that justified? Is it warranted? Is what you're actually thinking a reality?
Wow.
And
that's an interesting question, hey?
And then, I can't remember what the third column was for. It was probably just had in big text, don't step in front of a bus. It's all going to be okay. Don't panic. It was a very good way of looking at things and going, well, you know what? I'm actually not worthless. The short story is it was a good way of getting back on track, keeping some focus.
That's a really interesting one. I love the idea. I mean, the funny thing is about going to, cause as I mentioned, I went through a couple of different psychologists to really find a couple that were good. One of them was provided by my work and the other one was provided by Medicare, because in Australia you're allowed to access, under the previous government at least, up to 12 psychology sessions in a given year, or it might be actually 6, sorry.
I think it's 6
psychology sessions or 6 psychologist sessions in a given calendar year. So I did go through quite a few before I found the ones that worked. However, throughout the meetings with the other psychologists, you do pick up things like that question right there. How would somebody else deal with this situation? That is a brilliant question. That is a really fantastic question and a really great one to ponder. I think
because you're forced to be objective.
That's right.
When answering.
Which is the great problem when you go through the anxiety attacks, as sort of you said, Dr. Hawkes. When the steamroller starts, your brain will create all sorts of fantasies, or rather, you will create all sorts of fantasies attached to the scenario that triggers things, and you'll go on a great big emotional roller coaster ride. But it's those sorts of little tidbits, those sorts of throwaway questions that can really rock your brain and jolt things back into where they should be.
Go on, Dave.
I guess the other thing I think is worth mentioning here as well is that you're talking about how would someone else view this and things like that. And I did a PhD. That's where the doctor title comes from. And people who do PhDs, pretty close to 100% during that 3 or 4 year period that you're doing your PhD will suffer from depression or anxiety. And in scientists, we are eminently rational. We are very good at working things out. We are very good at researching, but anxiety and depression do not respect that. And I've certainly, I was one of that nearly 100% of people that suffered from sort of anxiety, and I've certainly suffered from anxiety episodes since then. And I don't talk about it a hell of a lot because it's part of what I imagine makes me human, and it's certainly, I've rarely come across anybody who's not had it. They may not have identified it as such, they may have not got treatment, they may have self-medicated, all these different bits and pieces, but it is part of the reality that I'm sorry, I'm being stalked by a cat.
Yeah, the cat jumping all over us.
I'm being stalked by a French cat, and this is it's quite surreal while trying to hold your train of thought. So I guess that's the thing. It's like all these different points, all these different, you're talking about different psychologists and different psychiatrists. These people not work for you, but they've got a job because they work for somebody.
Yes.
And if you do not find that seeing somebody or taking medication works for you, this is not antibiotics. This is not one stop, one treatment. There is a variety of things. If meditation works for you, that's great. If getting out and running at 5 o'clock in the morning works for you, that's great. Whatever you can do.
Doing a podcast.
Writing a blog, whatever it is that helps you to get through the day, as long as it doesn't hurt anyone and it's not detrimental to yourself either, then I think that there's 1,000 different ways that anxiety and depression are caused, and there's just as many ways to treat it, and it just depends on the individual. I've worked in infectious diseases, and infectious diseases are pretty uniform. If you get the flu, I can probably take a general stab at what sort of symptoms and how long it will last. Depressive and anxiety illnesses are completely different.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things I wanted to quiz you about, because when I went in and got diagnosed, it became more apparent that I actually had a very long family history of this. So it's a genetic trait that's part and parcel with who I am. It's just a case of now that it's presented itself dealing with it. But I'm one of the fortunate members of my family in that it's probably the least, I'm least affected by depression in my immediate family.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of genetic, there's certainly, you've also got to think about, this is one of those nature and nurture. If you're brought up in a house, in a family with mental illness, it's going to affect your development. Now, I don't know your particular case, but I certainly, I come from a family, again, we've got a couple of incidents of quite severe mental illness in the family, and I think most people, if you actually look into it, will. Now, if you have an aunt who lives across the sea that you've never said, who has really horrendous mental health illness, it doesn't necessarily mean you'll have any. It's a different upbringing. If it's a parent, if you've been brought up with a parent who's suffering from mental illness, even if you've not inherited any of that genetic background, it's going to affect you. And these are both these things. So if you come from a family with no history of mental health at all, ever, it doesn't mean that you can't get it. It's a really sort of, it sounds like I'm blurring everything up, but it's just, the point is...
So you're reciting a Freud textbook at the moment. It makes as much sense.
Can you just pass me that banana?
That's nice. As my Biology 101 teacher said many years ago, if there's ever a question of whether a trait is nurture or nature, the answer is always yes.
Exactly.
It makes sense. So we're fortunate to live in a country, as you said, Jake. We've had a recently enacted Mental Health Act that allows people to go and visit the quack and talk about your man feelings. In other countries where people may not be so fortunate, what's the next best option?
Well, the great thing is that most countries have helplines, things like suicide helplines, like Lifeline, Beyond Blue. We have Beyond Blue in Australia, which is really good. There's always the children crisis lines as well, things like that. But there is also psychologists that you can access for a fee if your country doesn't provide such a service.
Just a little point there. Anyone who follows at Joshua Dammit, he regularly retweets the links to Lifeline and so forth in the States where people can call up and get free mental health advice because he's a victim. He came on the show and he's had a really rough gig and PTSD. He served overseas in the military and he has first-hand experience in in this. So, yeah, getting on the phone to somebody would help. And I might also just throw in that a few weeks ago I was contacted by somebody in a country name. I won't pinpoint them, but they were in a position where they were...
Does it rhyme with Sploran?
No, but it will...
Splorar?
Let's say it's in the vicinity. And this particular person was really at the end of their tether. And the only person who they were able to contact happened to be me on the other end of Skype. So I picked it up, and it was a real shock for me taking that call. But I sat there, I listened, and I'd never met this person in my entire life, but I sat there and listened, and I think it made all the difference. And that person's subsequently gone on and been put in touch with a few other people who were in a similar situation, and they've found their support network. So I think the first step for anyone would just be to speak about it. It doesn't matter with whom.
Yeah, I mean, we've just had Are You OK Day, which is not rogue. It's just asking the questions. All of these things are cyclical. So if you see that someone's they're having a rough time, and it could be, and I mean, the problem with a lot of depression and anxiety is it doesn't happen when you're about to lose your girlfriend or about to lose your job. It could be when you've just been promoted. We're about to have a baby in about 2 months. And so again, this is the depressive illness.
You and Adam, sorry?
Yes.
You and Adam are about to have a baby?
Yes, it will be...
I thought you looked cute together, I must say.
Yeah, it's going to be called Rooks. And it's often good things that can sort of throw us out of whack. So, having a baby, buying a house, these things are actually positive, but they can sort of trigger these episodes.
Well, there's buying the house. There's also realising that it's the bank buying your house for you.
The significant debt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, still, you generally say buying a house is something that people congratulate you when you buy a house. People congratulate you when you're about to get married. And if anyone's ever got married, seriously, one of the most stressful times in your life. But it's a positive thing, and having a baby is a positive. But again, you're looking at stress. And so, just when someone looks like they're having a bit of a rough time, if you just, as Adam did,
ask them if they're okay.
Ask them if they're okay. Take them out for a coffee or a beer or whatever it is, and just I had a friend who was he'd had a rough time, and we actually drove up to Sydney for a party, and he spent an afternoon. We were just sort of hanging out at the Sydney Zoo, and he was watching seals, and we spent a good 3 hours watching the seals and just talking crap. And a couple of years
Probably
later,
better than watching seal. I mean, that'd be enough to push people over the edge, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that fingernail thing I don't really get. And that for him was enough. It wasn't a severe thing, but just having a bit of a chat and in an environment where he felt really comfortable, and that's all he needed. Sometimes that's all anyone needs. And
can I just say that's really beautiful. And the great issue I think in our society as Australians is, I think, and I'm sure that a lot of other countries can relate, is that we as men are sometimes called upon to be the bastions of masculinity, and part of that is the mentality that we're not supposed to share perhaps all of our feelings. And one of the greatest issues with that is that when people go through a depressive episode or an anxious episode, they may not know where to turn. They may think, in fact, that they are completely alone, and that can be exacerbated by those by the feelings.
There's some clever advertising I've seen on the internet at the moment. A guy called Dr. Brian Ironwood. Have you seen those? They're rather amusing character who, it's all very tongue-in-cheek, and this guy is basically all about being masculine, but talking about your man feelings. So Dr. Brian Ironwood, if you bung that into Google, I think you'll find that's...
Man therapy.
Mantherapy.com.au.
Man therapy. I love it.
Mantherapy.org.au. So, and I'm pretty sure you'll be able to access that from anywhere in the world. So if you're feeling like you need some man therapy, speak to a friend or jump on the website and speak to Dr. Brian Ironwood, because it looks like he knows his way around therapy.
You're totally right, though, Dr. Hawkes. The premise that if you have a friend and they look like they need a bit of a hand, take on board your obligation as a friend and ask them if they're okay. Take them out to the local water park or something like that. Do something with them. Just hang out for a little bit, because it can sometimes just be all that they need in order to trigger the right chemical symptoms to get things back into order. And the other thing that I did want to say, just about taking the medication, I now, after going through these depressive and anxious episodes, have been sort of pushed to reevaluate how I look at us I look at myself. And at least when I'm thinking of depression and anxiety, I'm looking at myself as a bag of chemicals, as a great big bag of elements and chemicals and hormones and et ceteras. And if, one or two of those chemicals are being absorbed into the body in a particularly hazardous way, and there's a medication that I can take to correct that, the way that one of those chemicals or one of those hormones or et cetera is being absorbed into my body in order to, correct that, then taking the medication, as I said sort of in the beginning, I did kind of feel like I was cheating when I took the medication in the beginning.
Even though I really tried to keep an open mind about it. I thought, look, I don't want this to be the coward's way out. I think this, have to look at the end game. The end game is getting better.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry to interrupt you there, Adam, but having that mentality, though, of looking at the body as sort of that bag of chemicals, if you can take that medication and it rights the symptoms, wow. I mean, how powerful is that?
It's no different to any other medication. I mean, people wouldn't get embarrassed about going to the doctor to get
Ventolin,
insulin.
The thing is, and I guess I look at it from a scientific or in some ways a medical view. It's like I had a knee reconstruction a few years ago. I had to do something quite, I don't look forward to surgery, but that's what I had to do to fix myself. So I had the surgery, and then I had painkillers. And then I also did physical therapy to do everything, and it got me back to a point where I can run, I can do anything with my knee. This is absolutely exactly the same thing with your brain, because sometimes you have to sort of take medications or do something invasive, which is, a medication is invasive. And then you have to do your rehab, which is your meditation, or you're going for your run, or whatever you need to do, and adopt that sort of holistic approach to drinking less, all those sorts of things to fix what is essentially you've pulled a hamstring in your brain, and you just need to sort of do what you need to do. And, it might be one of those injuries that reoccurs every so often, but, once you know how to get it to a point where you can use your brain fully again and everything's working right.
It's a great analogy.
The hamstring in the brain. I like
you pulled a hamstring in your brain.
I'll use that. I'll have to
that'll
take
be
a couple of
the
hamstring
title.
tablets.
I'm not that bright with a lot of things, so I just put everything in analogies. But you wouldn't hesitate in doing it for a physical injury. So why is it you're just looking at a brain, which again is a bunch of cells, and something's gone a bit wrong, and you need to fix it. And it's actually less invasive, to take a medication than it is to have someone drill into the bone of your knee. But no one would bat an eyelid about doing that.
There's nothing like a good arthroscopy and lavage.
So we've gone almost an hour, guys. We haven't mentioned God once. So do we just want to slip in a quick God? Have you seen God today, Dave?
No, but I have heard they've been doing some studies where they've actually looked at people who have heart attacks, and they did a study, and apparently 15 to 18% of people who had heart attacks, when you actually stop the blood flow to the brain, those 18% of people, it had unusual brain activity, and they had near-death experiences, and some of them reported seeing God.
Do you think that's what's constantly happening to Ray Comfort?
Maybe he's on the wrong medication.
Not enough blood to the brain, you're saying, Adam?
Possibly.
I'm not a doctor, but I'm prepared to have a guess. That's my diagnosis.
It's funny. I did an episode on for the Imaginary Friend Show. I did one some time ago on atheism and depression with an ex-pastor from the US whose name escapes me at the moment. Floridan pastor.
It's not the guy who's just got busted for having sex with young boys to stop them being homosexual.
No, which one is that?
It's just been charged.
Oh, okay.
No, right. He's an ex-pastor. He was the first graduate of the clergy project.
Okay.
I can't recall his name. But anyway, so we did this episode together on atheism and depression, and we looked at quite a bit of the research to see whether there was in fact a corollary between the two, because they do seem to be intrinsically linked for whatever reason. It appears that there is some research suggesting that religious people do better with anxiety and depression, with symptoms of anxiety and depression. However, that was linked to the reason that they cited as them being better able to handle it is the community aspect. The fact that they are so, intrinsically linked to a community.
They've got their own Dr. Brian Ironwood.
That's exactly right. Who was resurrected after 3 days, apparently.
All right. So, is there anything, Dave, you'd like to add?
No, I guess the only thing I'd like to add, is it's been repeated many times, is that if anyone's listening to this, no matter what country you are in, there's a variety of websites. There's things like Beyond Blue, again, the Dr. Brian Ironwood Man Therapy, and all these things are great starting points. Just Google it and maybe just have a bit of a read, because sometimes, different things work for different people depending on your cultural context and your gender, all these different things. If there's something you kind of go, well, I don't really want to take medication. As you guys have pointed out, this is not necessarily the first step, but there are other things, and the best thing you can do is start a conversation with a health professional and then just take it from there. And just by starting that conversation, if you're having these sorts of issues, that's, you can build that relationship, and so you can get to a point where if you feel you do need to go that next step, they can guide you through it, and it won't be a caustic experience for you.
And Jake, anything you'd like to throw in?
Oh, absolutely. If you're going through these depressive, anxious, panic-like symptoms, then you need to know that it's because you're human. You're an animal, you're a mammal, you're just like everybody else.
Hormones.
You're a bag of hormones and chemicals and et cetera. You're just like everybody else. I mean, you are not alone. And that's the one message that I would like to give to anybody who experiences this awful, awful thing that we go through as humans, as animals, is that you are absolutely not alone. There are thousands upon billions of us who go through the similar or the same.
Almost everybody will experience depression at some point in their life. Yeah.
Absolutely. So please don't be afraid to share it. You can gain so much by sharing, by seeking help, by relating your symptoms to somebody else, because
by coming on the Herd Mentality.
By coming on the Herd Mentality podcast. All you need to do is share what you're going through, and I think you'll find that so many people just like you are going through the exact same thing in a different way and can help you through it. You're not alone.
All right. So, Jake, your website, I think, is imaginaryfriendshow.com.
Correct.
Dr. Dave, you've got a little project coming up as well. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Sure. As I said, I work in neuroscience, and I'm doing something a little bit different, trying to involve the community a little bit more, and essentially I'm looking for your money. We're starting a crowdfunding project in the next couple of weeks called Name the Virus, where people will be able to contribute. We're trying to raise $10,000. This will allow us to build about 4 little special types of viruses called viral vectors, we can use them to understand how the brain works, how anxiety. We're also working on projects to do with stroke, multiple sclerosis, fear, a whole variety of things, epilepsy, and we can use these little tools. So it's at Name the Virus 1 on Twitter or Name the Virus on Facebook, and it will start in a couple of weeks. And if you donate some money from $20, you'll get a shout out on our website, but you'll also get to contribute a name. The most popular name we'll call the People's Virus, and we'll name one of the viruses after you. If you do have a bit of money No. Well, maybe, yeah.
Oh, okay, if I give you, if I spot you 10 grand,
well,
we'll
you
call
don't
it
even
the
have
Deepak Comfort
You
virus.
don't even need to have to spot me 10 grand.
Oh, okay.
$2,500.
Oh, bargain.
You get to name a virus. Obviously, there's some conditions. You can't do anything slanderous or outside social norms.
Oh, that's me out. I'll keep it
$2,500 and you'll get to name it. So you could name it the Herd Mentality virus.
All right.
You could name it the Imaginary Friend. All those different things. I've also had the suggestion Noodles, which does actually tickle Noodles. So this is something I'm doing. If you just follow those two, so Name the Virus 1 at Twitter or Name the Virus on Facebook, we'll try and keep information and also give you a bit more information on exactly what these viruses are. Some of the stuff that I do as a scientist, like I've already said, that I'm on the Facebook, that I'm up here in Sydney to do a conference and jump on a work trip to try and see a football game. So yeah, maybe gives people a bit of an insight into science. So even if you can't afford to donate, which is fine, you can follow those sorts of two ways of getting information as give you an idea of the life of a scientist in Australia.
Brilliant. All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for coming on the show. At Jake Farr Wharton and at Mr. Hawkes, and I'm at Adam Reeks. This has been the Herd Mentality Podcast, guys. Thanks for coming on. I'll see you on Twitter.
Peace out.
See you. Cheers. Bye. week's crazy bonus material is a chat with Shane Greenup from Rebutta.com. As always, remember, the herd mentality bonus material is completely free. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Herd Mentality bonus material. And today, on the line from another country who was originally from this country but is now in another country, we have Shane. Hi, Shane.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Where are you?
So I'm in the UK at the moment, near Chelmsford in Essex. At the moment, I'm just out here working on Rebutta.
I was introduced to you, not through Twitter, which is my usual means of stalking people, rather a mutual friend of ours who put us in touch and said, well, Adam's a bit of an atheist nutbag. He might be worth putting in touch with you. So that's happened and we're on the line now. And you're doing something called Rebutta. Tell me more about it.
The idea for Rebutta struck me about 2 years ago when I was reading an article. The article in question actually happened to be about vaccination. They claimed that the study showed that it was, caused more illness than it helped with and that sort of stuff. And the link to a study, and I went and had a look at the study, and the study was flawed in many ways, and I could see it quite clearly. People were sharing this article. I figured the easiest way to respond to it was to find a rebuttal, someone who had systematically worked through and explained why the arguments and claims in this article were wrong. And I wasted 2 hours trying to find a rebuttal which someone had written already, on the assumption that they had, unable to find one. And it just really struck me as an obvious thing the internet needs, is a way to find these rebuttals, which I know are written, because, if you spend enough time on the internet, you know what exists.
Not everyone has a bullshit filter, do they?
No. Or I think what often happens is people just already have their conclusions and want to find evidence for them.
It's funny you mentioned that. I was actually having a little bit of a back and forth debate with a family member, and I typically don't do this with people I know firsthand, because it usually ends in tears or bloodshed. But in this particular instance, the family member was saying, I don't use a mobile phone because it cooks my brain. I don't have a microwave because it cooks my brain. These were things that, try as I might to sit them down and say, well, look, here's the difference between ionizing radiation and non-ionizing radiation. It's not something that they want to hear. They've settled on their conclusion because, I saw it on the internet. And had a tool such as Rebutta, and I'll get you to elaborate a little bit more about it and how it works, but perhaps if that was integrated into people's day-to-day activities, they wouldn't arrive at conclusions quite so quickly, or they would at least arrive at more informed conclusions.
Yeah, this is exactly my hope. There's this sort of two-tiered problem where once people have made up their minds, it's really hard to change them. On one hand, people think Rebutta won't work because the people that need it won't use it. They don't care. They won't change their minds. It's a very shallow way of looking at it, it won't work because they won't change their minds. But I'm less concerned about changing the minds of people that have them up as much as I'm concerned about leveraging the people that have made up their minds, because everyone's made up their minds on many things. Let's use those people to create this map of this discussion, because the internet is a giant discussion. Everyone's arguing their perspectives and points of views.
Usually in caps.
Let's make them, whatever way they're doing it, though, they're expressing their opinions, and these opinions exist. We can ignore them and say, well, you're an idiot because you disagree with me, or we can engage in this discussion and use it so that the people, particularly, just think of kids and teenagers growing up, where the internet's a very present part of their life. Think of them growing up in a world where instead of being handed opinions, here, believe this, and slowly being brainwashed, we can give them a world where it's here, believe this, and then when it's given to them in the form of a link, they go and look at it, and as they're looking at it, this thing pops up and says, but someone disagrees with it. Check it out. Someone disagrees with it. And so instead of being immersed in one perspective at a time, you're actually being immersed in a discussion about the issue from opposing perspectives. So before they form the belief, they are given multiple perspectives.
So teach...
That's what excites
what's the
me.
expression? Teach the controversy.
The controversy?
There you go.
Yeah, that is a... that phrase is about creationism and teachers, people trying to say that they should teach the controversy between evolution and creationism is where that phrase comes from. Interestingly enough, one of the best responses I've seen to the people in Kansas, I think it was, who tried to get warning labels put on science textbooks saying warning evolution is just a theory, which is that same sort of thing, teach the controversy, right? It's like, this is just a theory, watch out, be careful, don't believe. Best response I've ever heard to that was, it doesn't go far enough. The sticker should say, warning, everything is just a theory, question everything, because that's the reality of science. There's nothing in science is dogmatic. It has to be questioned. But the problem with the creation, intelligent design movement is that they want to specially point out evolution as if it is somehow especially open to question beyond all other science.
And it is something that is often misinterpreted as even the word theory, but there is a difference between theory and hypothesis, certainly in terms of scientific jargon.
Yeah, and more importantly, there is a different type of meaning between the word theory and fact, and you can have a factual theory, and a lot of people don't understand that, and that's the hardest one to communicate.
Yeah.
There's a great paper by punctuated equilibrium biologist, wrote a great paper called Evolution as Fact and Theory.
Stephen J?
Yeah. Yes, that's the one. Stephen J. Gould. Thank you.
Well, thank you,
Can't believe his
Google.
name
I could
slipped mine.
have rebutted that because I, in fact, have the little app installed in Chrome, so tell us about that.
Yeah, that's right. I hadn't actually explained how it works. I've been talking about it as if everyone knew.
Try and keep up, listeners.
So the original idea, of course, is I'm looking at an article and I knew that rebuttals existed to it, I just couldn't find them. So the idea is simply, well, why isn't there a way to look at a page and go, show me a list of all the rebuttals to this page? So that's what we've tried to develop with Rebutter. We can't automatically find the rebuttals though. There's no way to identify whether a page rebuts another. There's no programmatic way that it's achieved yet.
That'd be a massive,
so we
that'd be a
crowdsource
massive spider bot trawling the internet.
A spider bot alone wouldn't work because programmatically we can't determine
in the
intention.
context of the...
We don't know what an author is. Yeah. So we crowdsource it, so all of our users, whenever you read a rebuttal, you're reading a page and it says such and such is wrong because, you just need to be, with our human intelligence, not programmatic, aware that, this looks like a rebuttal. And then you can submit it to our system. And that way, when you identify that this is a rebuttal of that page, whenever anyone else in our system lands on that page, they get a pop-up that says someone disagrees with this page, and they have access to that response.
Okay, so for example, I'm going to jump over to the first one that comes up on your website in terms of the weblog. So there's a bloke here called Jeff Short, sounds like a lovely bloke, written the weblog, Why There Are Atheists. If I move my mouse cursor up to the little icon in the top right-hand corner of Chrome, it has a little icon there that says this page has one rebuttal, and I can click on that and it'll take me to the rebuttal to that web page.
Yeah. How
many rebuttals have you got? Do you keep tabs on this?
Yeah, we're about to reach 5,000, I think.
Yeah, right.
So that's so far. We're still very young as well, and still very small and growing.
But you've attracted some pretty reasonable press too.
Yeah, we've got a little bit of press. Not very much press at all, really. We haven't been out looking for press. We've been following a very systematic growth pattern because we have a very strong chicken and egg issue where before we can get a lot of users, we need to have a lot of content, and before we can get the content, we need a lot of users.
You and I are in the same boat.
Yeah. It's very common with these sorts of things. So we've been growing systematically, specifically by starting with the skeptic community and the atheist community and the humanist rationalist sort of movements, because these communities basically identify as, particularly the skeptic community, this rational scientific skepticism, questioning things. Is this real? Where's your evidence? And so more often than not, they write rebuttals and write responses.
And would this be useful for a theist?
Yes, it will be useful for everyone of any belief. For everyone that has firm beliefs, which is every human on Earth, the main motivation, I believe, for installing is to defend your position. So people will more often than not install it because they want people to know that they've got good arguments against their position. Whether it be that you want to present the arguments of intelligent design against evolution or defend evolution against intelligent design, that's a good motivator for installing Rebutter and adding those arguments. So we'll accept arguments for all perspectives because Rebutter doesn't take an opinion. We don't determine the right or the wrong. We just facilitate the ability to engage in the discussion.
So basically, whatever position you're searching for, it will offer an alternative view.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So useful for theists. The two theists who listen to this, because I've only got 4 people who listen to my show.
And 2 of them are theists.
I'd like to think 2 of them are theists.
Okay.
It's useful for you guys as well.
Because it presents all sides, they will get as well, the counter-arguments, defending their position. But definitely the main strength is for everyone, you will be able to get opinions which argue against what you believe, and that's never a bad thing. It doesn't matter how wrong it is. My favorite quote of all time is from Carl Sagan's Demon-Haunted World, where he's actually paraphrasing John Stuart Mill, but the quote goes along the lines of, silencing an opinion is a peculiar evil, because if the opinion is right, then we miss our opportunity of exchanging error for truth, and if it is wrong, then we miss our opportunity to see the collision between error and truth, and our understanding of the truth becomes pallid and lifeless, to mangle the quote. And I think that, when we encounter an argument which is wrong, it still sort of invigorates our understanding of the truth. And so I think there's a lot of power in that.
It's pretty profound. Okay, so I've jumped onto my favourite font of all knowledge, conservapedia.com.
Yes. There are a couple of articles from there in it. I'm trying to remember if it was evolution that I put in. Yeah, the issue with the root page, of course, is you need an argument against the whole website.
Well, see, I'd be capable of doing that in one word.
Yeah. Yes. I
don't think that would get past your filter.
Conservapedia Evolution has 3 rebuttals against it.
And then they link to external sources, so it's nice being able to go to something that isn't on the same page. It just adds a little bit more credibility. But tell me, our mutual friend mentioned that you'd had something to do with Richard Dawkins, or the Richard Dawkins Foundation.
Yeah, so a bit over a year ago, I was at the Amazing Meeting in Las Vegas, a large skeptic convention, and the Richard Dawkins Foundation were present with a stall there, and I got to meet the team behind the foundation, and they loved Rebuttal straight away. At the time, we were still we were only about 2 or 3 months into development, so we were still very young and still had a lot of work to get done. So not much happened at that time, but I went back this year, and I actually went and stayed at the head office of the foundation, which is just a house in the woods, and stayed there with the team for about a week, and got to know them very well, and talked more about what we're doing and what we're trying to achieve and what they're doing, and have organised to develop a website-based plugin for their website.
Oh, wow. So people can go to the Richard Dawkins Foundation for Reason and Science and search directly from within that and have Rebuttal have an effect on the outcome? Is that the gist of it?
Yeah, not so much with the searching, so much as just sort of integrating our database with their content. So whenever they write an article, if any of their links link to pages which are in our database, so either rebutted or rebutting, we will interact with that link in a way. So at the moment, we just pop up a little logo. It's not live yet, but this is what we've developed. It pops up a little logo which says, which when you hover over the logo, it tells you, this link is rebutted 3 times, or this link rebuts 5 pages. And if you click on that, it takes you to our link page, sort of our map of that, the context of that page within the greater internet discussion. So we're developing that at the moment, and we'll integrate that with their website when it all comes together, basically.
So you're growing quickly?
Yeah, the last few weeks have been fantastic for us. We've been getting a lot of coverage through the Richard Dawkins Foundation. They've been writing about us a bit through Skeptic Magazine and Success on Reddit, and various social media has been working very well for us. And the last few weeks we've grown by about 70% or something like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so for anyone listening and you're interested in how Rebuttal works and think it would be useful to you in debating either theists or atheists or other, jump onto rebuttal.com, so that's www.rbutr.com. And you've got plugins available I know you've got one available for Chrome. Are there any others?
We had we're bug checking Firefox extension right now. So hopefully within a week or 2 we'll have Firefox, and then as soon as that's done, we'll be expanding to Internet Explorer and Safari.
Oh, do you have to do...
It's
really?
It's funny, no one ever asks for Internet Explorer. I've had one person ask for it in the entire time we've been developing. It's just the system we're using.
Just between you and me, would an Internet Explorer user benefit from this, do you think?
I know. This is I think the most common Internet Explorer user is actually someone in a cubicle in an office where they've got no choice but to use it. It's default installed. But there are people out there. I think Internet Explorer 8 or something like that did bring it sort of up to date with the rest of the browsers. So I don't know if the criticism is justified anymore or not. I haven't used it, so I actually don't know.
Well, I actually use something far more obscure than that. I only have Chrome for a couple of sites that don't work well in Opera.
Okay.
And Opera's far more obscure. That only accounts for about 1.4% of the global internet
traffic,
but I find it to be quite good.
Well, yeah, I actually do hope to extend Opera as well, but of course it's going to have to be last for that very reason.
Well, I'll be distant 72 to Internet Exploiter.
Yeah.
So what's your next step?
The thing that I'm most excited about developing, and it sort of goes hand in hand with this website integration, is an iframed version. So the idea will be that you can link to an article which you want to show someone is rebutted, is wrong. You can link directly to that erroneous article within a rebutter frame, and so it loads the page. It gives them the content that they want to see, but it gives it to them with this little frame at the top that says, there are 5 rebuttals to this page. So the advantage of this is twofold. One, it frames the content cynically, skeptically. It's like, here's the information that you believe, but it's wrong.
But you're outnumbered 20 to 1.
And it allows you to link to content without sort of giving it link juice. I don't know how much your listeners are aware of search engine optimization practices and how the internet works. But whenever you link to content through Twitter, through Facebook, through any medium, if you link to that content, you effectively vote for it. You're telling the world that this link is worth linking to. So it's actually quite important, when you're having these discussions, and particularly in the sort of global battles that we have with misinformation. You don't want to be giving misinformation any extra help. It's got enough, and our job is to try and destroy misinformation, because it harms the human condition by making people believe things which are demonstrably not true.
So when you say misinformation, what you actually mean is Alex Jones.
Yeah, I mean a lot of things. There's a lot out there where, if it's not outright lying, it's just a manipulation of information.
Deliberately misleading, regardless. Yeah. I was really hoping that you were going to integrate it with Siri, so when the Jehovah's Witnesses knock on your door, you can just whip out your iPhone and go to the Rebutta app. Just hand them the phone and let it read to them why they're wrong about, well, everything, and go and make yourself a cup of tea.
First step first, we build the system. Second step, this is what's going to happen. I have no doubt that when we reach this sort of critical mass that we need to build a whole database map of the entire internet, I don't know if it'll be 5, 10, or 20 years, but we will have that sort of technology happening. So So this is why it's actually very important, because our current technology is this passive information delivery system where Google basically says, what is it that you want to believe? Here it is. Congratulations, you may now believe this and feel justified.
It even gives you the preemptive suggestion as to what you might be searching for.
Exactly.
Because Google does a wonderful job of caching all sorts of stuff, so cookies and your Gmail inbox, and searching for common keywords and terms to advertise to you.
Yeah, so you've got the filter bubble effect as well. That's the way it currently works, and as technology gets better, it's going to become more integrated into our lives. With Google Glass being the first step, we're going to have, contact lens-based interfaces with the world, permanently connected to the internet, and every time someone asks you a question, it'll pop into your head through the internet, whatever it may be, as far as this technology is going to go. And do we want an internet which pops the first thing into your head is the thing that you already believe? Here, you believe it some more. Here, you have more evidence to argue your biased, agenda-driven belief. Or do we want a system which says, here's what you believe, but here's the discussion. Here's why some people question it. Understand.
Here's what normal people believe.
Yeah, well...
or at least...
Don't overestimate normal people necessarily, though.
I saw a Lunig cartoon. Have you ever heard of Lunig?
Yes.
You probably would, seeing as you're an Aussie. And it had just a single box cartoon and a picture of a child sitting on a milk crate in the middle of a large empty room, and it said, "The Convention for Normal Children." That was very funny. So would you like to give us some details? Yeah,
so as you said earlier, it's a very easy name to remember, rbutr.com, and if you go to the website, everything you need is there, very accessible, immediately ready to go to install in Chrome, very soon available in Firefox, and on the homepage there's links to getting to know Rebutta, learn more about it, and frequently asked questions, and hopefully all of your questions can be answered there.
Okay, I also noticed you had a Twitter account.
Oh yes, I always forget about the social media stuff. At Rebutta.com is at rbutr.
Because all 4 listeners of my show typically go and follow whoever comes on here, so you'll pick up at least 4, I would hope.
4 new followers? I hope so. I'll be watching the ticker. So please do follow us. We do tweet stuff. I forget to tell people about it, but I actually do use it. We also have a Facebook page, which is just facebook.com/Rebutta.
Excellent. Well, you're doing a fine service for the atheist community, and we thank you for it.
Thank you.
Any final closing statements?
Use Rebutta.
Use Rebutta. Okay, we'll go with that. In fact, I might even edit that just to pop it in right at the beginning. So it just sounds like a wonderful introduction. All right.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Shane.
Thank you so much, Adam.